Can France fix its economy, or is rising debt and inflation pushing it toward a crisis? The French economy, a leading European force, is facing troubling times. Rising debt and inflation are straining the country's financial stability and causing widespread concern. Can France overcome these hurdles, or is it headed toward an economic crisis? In this video, we'll break down the current issues and explore the future of France's economy. Stick around as we dive into the challenges and potential solutions that could shape the next chapter of this economic powerhouse. The debt crisis. France's national debt is one of the most pressing issues facing its economy today. In 2024, France's national debt, which currently stands at a staggering 3.2 trillion euros, a figure that continues to climb. In fact, France's fiscal situation appears increasingly precarious. The deficit, now at 167 billion euros, 5.5% of GDP, could surpass 6% by year's end, with national debt projected to hit 3.5 trillion euros, or 114.7% of GDP. France is far beyond European Union's limits. So, France is well above that threshold, and this has serious implications for the country's future. The most immediate consequence of this growing debt is that it places significant pressure on government finances. A larger portion of France's budget must go towards servicing the debt, which means paying interest to lenders. In fact, France will spend more than 50 billion euros just on interest payments this year. This increasing debt is not only a national issue, but also a global concern. As the debt grows, so does France's vulnerability to interest rate fluctuations. For example, rising interest rates from the European Central Bank, ECB, designed to curb inflation, make it more expensive for France to borrow. Inflation and its impact. Inflation is another major factor contributing to France's economic struggles. After a period of relatively low inflation, the cost of living in France has surged, with inflation rates peaking at 5.2% in 2023, while inflation has since slowed slightly. Prices for essential goods, such as food and energy, remain high. This inflationary pressure affects consumers and businesses alike, making it harder for French households to afford basic necessities. Energy prices, in particular, have been a significant source of inflation. Due to geopolitical tensions and the energy crisis, energy costs have soared, especially following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. France, while being less dependent on Russian gas than some of its neighbors, still faces high energy bills as global supply chains are disrupted. This is reflected in rising electricity and gas bills, which weigh heavily on households and businesses alike. For consumers, the consequences are clear. Purchasing power has diminished. Workers are finding it harder to keep up with the rising costs of living, and while wages have risen somewhat, they have not kept pace with inflation. This means many households are facing real-term pay cuts, making it more difficult for people to maintain their standard of living. At the same time, businesses are also feeling the pressure of rising input costs. For example, small businesses that rely on raw materials and energy are seeing their profit margins shrink, with many passing the increased costs on to consumers. This creates a cycle of higher prices, lower purchasing power, and potentially slower economic growth. The French government has taken some steps to mitigate inflation, including energy subsidies and social welfare support. However, these measures are only short-term solutions and do not address the underlying issues of inflation and wage stagnation. The unemployment problem and job market. Despite relatively low unemployment rates, the French labor market is facing several structural issues that could undermine the economy in the long run. Underemployment is rising, meaning that many workers are employed but not working as many hours as they would like or need. According to recent reports, around 1 in 10 French workers are underemployed, often working part-time jobs that don't offer full benefits or adequate pay. The slow pace of economic growth exacerbates this problem. France's GDP growth is sluggish, averaging just 1 to 2% per year over the past decade. This slow growth has led to fewer job opportunities, particularly in sectors like manufacturing, where automation and offshoring have reduced the number of available positions. The youth unemployment rate is also notably high, particularly in disadvantaged disadvantaged regions. Many young people are entering the workforce without the necessary skills to compete in an increasingly digital and globalized economy. As automation and artificial intelligence continue to reshape industries, many low-skilled jobs are disappearing, further contributing to the unemployment problem. In response, the French government has implemented a series of reforms aimed at improving labor market flexibility, such as relaxing strict labor laws to make hiring and firing easier for businesses. However, critics argue that these reforms are too focused on the needs of employers and not enough on creating good quality, well-paying jobs for workers. Government response and reforms. So, what has the French government done to address these challenges? Over the past few years, the government has implemented several significant reforms aimed at reducing the national debt, improving the labor market, and stimulating economic growth. One of the most controversial measures was the pension reform that raised the retirement age from 62 to 64. This reform was meant to reduce the financial strain on France's pension system, which has been struggling due to an aging population and insufficient contributions. However, this reform sparked widespread protests across the country, with many arguing that it unfairly impacts working-class people who cannot work longer due to the physical demands of their jobs. Despite the public outcry, the French government has pressed ahead with the reform, stating that it is necessary for the long-term health of the nation's finances. Can France overcome the crisis? The real question now is, can France fix its economy? The French economy has a number of structural strengths that can help it weather the storm. For example, France is still a global leader in key sectors like luxury goods, aerospace, and agriculture. While recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, the tourism industry remains a major contributor to the economy, attracting millions of visitors each year. Moreover, France is a founding member of the European Union, and as such, it benefits from strong trade ties with other EU countries. Its membership in the EU also provides access to European funds for recovery, which can be used to stimulate economic growth and innovation. The French government will need to make difficult decisions about debt reduction, public spending, and labor market reforms. One hopeful sign is that France's digital and green economy sectors are showing potential for long-term growth. By focusing on innovation and sustainability, France could create the kind of high-tech jobs that could drive future economic expansion. So, is France heading for an economic crisis, or can it overcome its challenges? France's future hinges on making bold, strategic decisions about its economy. Whether it can reduce its debt, tackle inflation, and create sustainable jobs will determine whether it emerges from this crisis stronger or weaker. What do you think? Will France turn things around, or is the road ahead even tougher than we expect? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on all things global economy. And remember to hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on our next analysis of world economic trends.